Hey, I'm Casey Okupi with Free Speech Northwest, and today on Free Speech Northwest, Jonathan Lockwood is back. You're back!
Yes, I'm back in Oregon. I'm excited to be here.
I think that's great. So, there's a lot that's happened since last time you were here.
Yeah, the elections were a bloodbath for Republicans. We now have a new partisan supermajority. The Republicans have basically no hope to stopping tax increases, and the Democrats can essentially pass anything that they want. They normally used to have to, when you go through and introduce a tax hike in the legislature, they have to have a certain amount of votes. And previous to this election, the Democrats were basically stopped by one single Republican in each chamber. And now, because of the election results, the Democrats picked up one seat in each chamber that now makes it a supermajority.
That's terrible.
I don't know
That's
if I
scary.
that, but
it's frightening. Supermajority. There's nothing super about it to me. I think it's it's borderline like, super, you think Superman, good, positive. It's villainous.
Well, they are Superman for the unions. That's certainly true.
Okay.
So
they got that.
Yeah.
For the unions.
Yeah, for the unions.
But, yeah, it's scary because, like you said, taxes. I'm thinking that we're going to be taxed too much, and it's going to go, who knows, some sort of social problems that only apply to specific people or something like that?
Well, the thing is that they've already introduced over 80 tax hikes before the sessions even started, and, we see tax hikes on everything from, when you wake up in the morning and turn on the lights. That cap and trade tax that they're going to introduce will make it more expensive to heat your home, keep the lights on. That impacts really everyone on every level, especially the poor. They want to increase taxes on everything from cigarettes to beer sales to, they essentially want to tax, basically if you turn around and breathe, you get a new tax. So I think it's dangerous too, because it's like you have to look at the fact that we have in Oregon more revenue coming into the government than ever before, and budgets continue to increase every year. And there's no looking at how can we save money, how can we better use money. It's always just we need more money.
Yeah,
and,
always.
The state uses a procurement system. Some people may not know what that is, but the system that tracks the government agencies purchasing either goods or services, it is so flawed and outdated. Some of the government workers in the state still use MS-DOS for things, which my grandmother trained on in 1965. But the system's so outdated that we're spending 100 different prices for the same SKU of an item across agencies, and so we're wasting so much money that if you updated our procurement systems with a system called Oregon Buys, which just better tracks the government purchasing goods and services, we could save the amount of money total that the Democrats want to increase taxes by, simply by updating computer systems. So the tax hikes are totally unnecessary, and they're totally burdensome to the people in the state that need the most economic relief, not to be further choked.
Exactly. It's crazy. And what's weird is that system, like the DOS thing, that all came out way before planned obsolescence. Now you buy your cell phone, it doesn't work in 2 years. But it's so ironic that a lot of the Democrats would think that the poor, like you're saying, nickel and diming, that affects them. It doesn't affect the rich people as much. They're like, oh, okay, I gotta pay a little more taxes on my beer. You know what I mean? But then, yet they keep voting, and so we got a supermajority. The irony there is weird and scary.
Yeah, it's disappointing because I think that a lot of that falls on, voter registration and all these things that we can unpack. I think that Republicans have their work cut out for them in terms of messaging and reaching out to people, untraditional voters. A lot of my Democrat friends voted for Newt Buehler because they know that we need to fix PERS. They know that we need to address these issues, but a lot of them are more engaged in the political system and journalism, and so they can see that and see what really needs to happen more than somebody who's struggling to barely make ends meet. But in Oregon, I mean, the New York Times today just came out with an article about how parents are being financially punished for their kids being truant in schools, and then they can't afford to pay these fines, and then the parents can end up in jail for not paying these fines, which just furthers the problem of kids being truant, and it's just a trap. And so everywhere you look in Oregon, it's like these things are outdated. We're looking to the past for ideas for rent control, for example, a 1940s style policy. We're looking at, I think it was in the 20s or 30s that a gross receipts tax was created to help states that were experiencing record low levels of revenue. So it's like, why are we looking to the 20s record low levels of revenue policy when we're in almost 2020 and have record high levels of revenue? It doesn't really make sense. And the Democrats don't want to have these conversations, right? They don't want to debate the issues that they're forcing. Just like the previous session that I was in the legislature working with the Senate Republicans, they wanted to make it so that Oregon taxpayers are paying for free abortions all the way up until the last day of pregnancy, including for people who are here, illegally. And so, you ask them, well, why are you guys doing this? And they just get angry. I mean, senators, we're looking at with the Bureau of Labor and Industries Commissioner, looking at the workplace culture at the Capitol. And this is under the Democrats, right? And you have some senators like Steiner Hayward, who think it's acceptable to scream at staff on the Senate floor. I mean, she was screaming in my face for talking about abortion free for all being a wrong thing to pass, and how most people, most women I've talked to who are liberal do not agree with that proposal. And so it really, all of this circles back to it is on Republicans to articulate these things and get that message out there. And so, like I said, we have our work cut out for us.
Totally. I mean, that's just disturbing. It doesn't really sound healthy to use abortions as a potential method of birth control. If it's a free-for-all, that just sounds very unhealthy in so many different ways, emotionally, physically. And then you get this emotional backlash when you want to discuss it.
Right.
That's not good.
Yes, I mean, I think, one of the things I said to her was, you guys want to pass this, well, you are going to be asked to debate it. And, this was rampant that session. I just thought, why are you trying to pass these bills and you don't even want to talk about them? And it's because they know that people really are not so on board with those ideas. It's their donors, it's their base perhaps. But when they passed a bill to literally block the federal government from getting information about criminal illegal aliens, they wanted to block them. That's, there is actually even a Republican argument someone could make. I wouldn't personally make it, but for sanctuary state policies being somewhat in a conservative way, because it's the federal government's job to be taking care of immigration enforcement, and you can say, well, we don't want to use state funds to do the federal government's job. Now, I've never heard anyone really make that argument. And I do think that is the federal government's job, but you have to let them do it. And so blocking them from apprehending rapists and killers and all the other things, drug dealing, child trafficking, blocking the federal government from apprehending those people and deporting them is a lot different than saying, well, we're not going to enforce federal immigration law. Well, when they passed this bill to do that, they labeled it as a privacy bill for all Oregonians. And I just thought, well, that's not what the bill is. It's a obstruction of justice, really. And, they just couldn't handle that either. They get upset, they get mad, they get personal. And so, this coming session, we're going to see more of that likely. And, in Colorado, the Republican Party is much smaller now than it was when I first started working in politics. And there, when I first started, we were in the majority. But as a party shrinks, it's easier for one faction to take hold of it, right? Sometimes it's the moderate establishments. Sometimes it's like Looney Tunes, off the rails conservatives. But as a party gets so big, like it's gotten in Oregon for the Democrats, you can start to see factions form, similarly to how when a party is very small and there's power struggles. So I think this session too will see Democrats really at each other's throats, because you have in there senators like Shamia Fagan, who are very zealous in their push for more progressive policies, and then you have Speaker Kotek, who's kind of more in the realm of really keeping her caucus all aligned and together, and she gets them all on the same page. And then you have some that are more moderate, and I think that those moderates are going to be really squished into a corner, and so that will be interesting too, I think, to see.
Yeah, they start to eat each other alive. It's cannibalism.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I think that's on both sides. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's cannibalistic tendencies in both sides of politics. Especially like a lot of the new people who are just recently got into Congress and everything, talking about how the older Congress people are like been there too long and need to get out.
Yeah, I have a certain type of respect for Alexandra Cortez. I think that
I don't.
I think a lot of people look at her statements and just think, what in the world is she saying? But I think that it takes a lot of courage to go up against Speaker Pelosi in the way that she has, and to be young and so forceful and so passionate and just willing to put yourself out there. I mean, she's made herself a target for the establishment.
Yeah, we're still going to eat her alive.
Yeah, I just think
it's
so.
brave. It's brave.
And honestly, too, I think another New York Congresswoman, Stefanik, she basically was like, we need, as a party, to start bringing on more female candidates. We're losing the women's vote in so many states like Colorado. The Republican that ran for governor, Walker Stapleton, he could have chosen an amazing, female counterpart, lieutenant governor, in the race, like Heidi Ganahl, who is she's really impressive. She, has been really active in politics, and she's at CU Boulder right now as a chancellor, I believe. But it's just you have this vacuum of opportunity for women in the Republican Party, especially on the national level, and Congresswoman Stefanik wanted to fix that, and she just basically got railroaded by the NRCC, and so you see a lot of these millennial women in both parties getting knocked around by their leadership, and I think I've experienced that too in a lot of ways, in both Oregon and Colorado, and that you get kind of told, you're young, pipe down, you don't know what you're talking about yet. But when you really look at people's track records and accomplishments, it's this shouldn't be an age thing. It's not like Disneyland where it's you have the height requirement, and I just think that when you see AOC getting attacked the way that you do, it actually just emboldens her to continue down that same.
That's what I'm afraid of.
Yeah.
No, yeah, she's fun. Yeah. Well, you can be young and intelligent and have great ideas. You really can.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem, is that people are talking about.
I'm talking about you, not.
But people talk about Alexandra Cortez dancing, and they talk about Rashida Tlaib saying,
she's a good dancer.
The MF word. And it's instead of talking about Rashida Tlaib saying, the F-bomb,
so edgy.
we should be talking about the fact that she wiped Israel off the map on her first day in Congress, and that she has refused to condemn Hamas. There's a million other things we can be talking about them, rather than sounding like Puritans, oh, she cussed, when there's plenty of Republicans that have cussed on the record. We just look like hypocrites. There's all these things, and so it's to me, it's my biggest thing in politics has always been we need to have real conversations, rational conversations about things that actually people care about and that affect them. I come from a family with earnest beginnings, and who worked hard and worked their way up, and I think that that's most of America. And I don't think that my parents could have done what they did, in 80s, 90s, the way they did that then, now, today, with the burdens economically that families face. And, that's a big driver for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a lot. It's a lot to unpack and think about. It's scary. It's scary now what's going on in Congress and everything with all of the new supermajority, as you're saying, and then we have all these new ideas that, it used to be a bad word, like communist and socialist. These used to be, what is it, like, well, they used to be bad words, derogatory terms you would call someone.
Oh, right, even in 2016, it was not okay to call Obama a socialist.
Yeah, and now it's like...
He endorsed a bunch of socialists.
Yeah, pretty much. It's crazy. It's crazy what's going on. And it's crazy here. Like you were talking about Newt, and he's not here. He's not, well, I mean, he's not the governor. Kate is.
Yes.
So
4 more years if we're unlucky.
Yeah. 4 more years. Oh.
I mean, governors face scandals and controversies all the time. And so to think that she is for sure going to survive these next 4 years, I mean, there are a lot of issues in Oregon that need to be uncovered. And, whether it's the stuff happening in our schools, the stuff happening in the foster care system, the stuff happening in veterans care, the list goes on and on. And when you have people literally dying because of our public policy being so flawed, with veterans not having access to mental health care, with foster kids being ripped from, albeit very broken homes, and stuffed into hotel rooms with so-called child monitors, there's just all these different issues, and she's failed on every single one. And she may have gotten people's votes, but it's going to be time to, face the music and be held accountable for these issues. And today the Portland Public Schools audit came out, and it was a very damning audit of the school system, showing that there are racial disparities. There is like a culture of exploitation, and the school district retaliates against parents who speak out. They sue. My friend Kim Sordell, she sits on the State School Board of Education, and they targeted her, and the Democrats ran a bill specifically to kick her off the school board. That is something that is so abusive of government power. You see what's happening there, and it's startling.
How do you kick someone off the school board?
Well, they ran a bill to basically remove the Secretary of State's ability to have on the school board a proxy member. She's on the board, but she's not a voting member, and she basically serves there as almost like a watchdog or a voice for the Secretary's office. And the Secretary of State's office did this audit, and she's been at the forefront. I mean, she's the loudest, strongest voice against the teachers' unions in Portland. And she's helped serve parents that don't have the means to hire lawyers themselves. Like, she's done a lot of work out of the goodness of her heart. And, she's basically, been crucified for it. She's been sued, and she's been attacked personally. And so, I think that, she was at the press conference today for that. And her point has just always been the same, like that we should be prioritizing kids and not hustlers that use the contracting programs. And there's like all this, sexual exploitation that goes on in Portland public schools. And it's a culture of crime that's been allowed to be perpetuated. And Governor Kate Brown is the superintendent of our public schools. Yeah. She could have appointed somebody to that position, but she apparently wanted it for herself for whatever bizarre reason. I think that, people should ask why. She's been, a #1 spokeswoman for the unions.
So is she the superintendent right now?
Yes, so she oversees all of our public schools in Oregon. So at some point, someone's going to have to ask her, what are you doing about this? And she's, on board with everything, always committed to provide, like, for example, one of her most worn out talking points is, I am committed to ensuring all Oregonians have health care. Well, you can say you're covering everyone, but like, are they actually getting the health care? And veterans are dying while waiting for care. Foster kids are literally dying in the foster care system. It's like, when are you actually going to do something? It's not enough. It's always, I'm committed to, or we will, instead of we have, we fixed, we succeeded. You know, it's just all
just
this
more taxes,
PR,
too.
and it is a lot of taxes, and so Oregonians are basically being forced to stuff more money into broken vending machines instead of people fixing the broken systems here in Oregon.
As people go broke, they need to remember they could have had Newt, could have had somebody else, someone who was more fiscally responsible, you know. But you didn't. You just virtue, right? That's what they try to do, virtue signaling, you know.
Yeah, it is interesting to see people who are so clamor to virtue signal really be so head in the sand on so many issues that really matter. You know, and the thing is I came back to Oregon because I saw a huge need for communications experience to be helping out with different members in the party. And I mean, Kim Sordell's a friend. My friend Ben West and his husband Paul Rummel, they have Oregon Foster Families First. They are advocating for fixing the state's broken foster care system. And so it's like a lot of my close friends are in the trenches fighting for people's lives. You know, when it comes to veterans issues, Julie Parrish, she's been on the forefront of ensuring veterans have better access to mental health care, and so many others. You know, Justin Brecht, he was Kim Thatcher's aide, and he's working in the Senate Republican office. But we did a press conference, and he spoke about his experience losing one of his closest friends to post-traumatic stress, and he was urging the governor and the Senate Democrats to hear a piece of legislation so that we can get more mental health care facilities built. And the Democrats killed it because the unions were more concerned with keeping their patient loads up because they profit from it. They didn't want somebody to, quote, poach their patients. They literally said that. And so unions are really behind everything, and it's the sick axis of power between, you know, the unions and Planned Parenthood and NARAL and those groups and the governor and her allies. And so, you know, it's like when you look at these issues, I mean, it's like even NARAL having abortion ice cream parties with Rocky Roe versus Wade ice cream and these things. And you know, people that when they find out about these things really are so disgusted.
Absolutely. I
And
feel
they should
so
be.
bad for the voters. I feel so sorry for like a lot of voters not having the data. They don't have the data. Where's the access to the data? How are we getting this data out, this information? They don't know it because they'd vote differently if they knew all these little, I mean, you have all these bullet points, and we need to get this data out there, this information, because we'd have totally different, results on elections, completely different.
Yeah, so I've become friends with a lot of members of the media here, and the media system in Oregon is really struggling.
Yeah.
Newspapers are dying, and that's a big problem. I mean, I think that journalists are one of the, I mean, I went to journalism school in my undergrad, and I just think journalism and journalists really are what protect the people from a tyrannical government. I mean, our country was basically founded by journalists in a way. They were communicators. They were young. They were our age. They weren't, Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer's age. And I believe that people need access to the information. And you have, I've explained to people like, in the legislature, the House and Senate Republicans each have a spokesperson. And then the House Democrats and Senate Democrats each have a spokesperson, and then their Senate President and Speaker each have a spokesperson, at least one in each of these. And then the governor has a battalion of, I think, like 5 spokespeople. And then every Democrat agency has teams of spokespeople. Mm-hmm. So you have 2 people, and then I guess you can include state party in that too, right? Yeah. So you have like maybe 3 and then a few outside groups. So a handful of spokespeople against like an entire army. Yeah. So the media, which is very small, is being inundated from press releases from all of this and over here. And so, it takes a lot of work to get through all this clutter and noise and lies. I mean, the Oregon Health Authority under Lynn Saxton, who we got booted out of that position by Kate Brown was forced to fire her because the Oregon Health Authority was trying to take down Family Care, a provider of health care, in 2017. Family Care was considered a political enemy by the governor's administration. So OHA came up with a PR plan, a hit job to take down Family Care, and in that plan they said, well, we're going to find HIV patients, and we are going to find HIV patients to take them and put in the media to say Family Care is bad and the other CCOs are good. Well, that was revealed, and it was so unmanageable, the reaction to that they had just fired Lynn Saxton. Well, that's fine and dandy. You can get rid of one person, but all these other people that helped create that plan, they're hiding. I don't know where they are inside of Oregon's government, but they're somewhere. And the thing is, too, is that the governor's administration had something to do with that. And the CCOs, the coordinated care organizations that provide health care through Medicaid in Oregon, which Family Care was one of these, is now gone. They're Kate Brown's, one of her largest campaign contributors. And they were also overpaid a constantly changing number. It started out around $100 million, overpaid $100 million in tax money. So, I mean, it's just like you keep looking at issue after issue. These are not partisan issues. They're not ideologically tinged. It's really just about right and wrong. And so the governor is on the wrong side of all these issues. And I think that, you could have beat her if you held her accountable for every single one of these issues and really laid it out and forced the conversation. But, people get scared. It takes a lot of courage, and it takes being willing to be targeted, get your, legislation drafted against you to kick you off a board that you are perfectly, suited to sit on, and all those things. So, hit pieces in the media, and all that. And for too many in Oregon, there's this complacency with just taking table scraps from the Democrats and just keeping your mouth shut about these things. Like, you're right. If you're right, you should just be loud about it.
Loud.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, we're almost out of time, but yeah, that's a good point. I want to talk about this. Like you said that, there's this, they're willing to almost borderline compromise. Is there like a swamp on the right side of politics in Oregon? Because I've heard that there was from somebody.
Yeah, I think that in any state you're going to see people, there's a reality to a lot of the legislature that just is never going to be stamped out. You have to make deals with people to get other bills passed. Everyone's making arrangements, making deals. They call it horse trading. They call it all these things. But I think that there should be at least some level of, okay, we won't cross this line. On cap and trade, like, why would we help the Democrats pass cap and trade? It is a proposal that makes no sense, and it hurts the poor. And, all these different things. So, I don't really see Republicans ever really get a whole lot out of compromising with Democrats, because they could pass the bills anyway. And so why even be a part of the mess that's created? And then there are good bills to be, bipartisan on, and, other Republicans are not always going to agree with you on everything. So it sometimes makes sense to work with the Democrats on issues, like criminal justice. Not all Republicans are on board with that, and some are in some ways. And then, criminal justice reform sometimes takes like a more lawless approach to policy that it sounds good, and then all these ramifications. So I don't know. I'm optimistic, though. I think that the Democrats are going to overplay their hand, and I think that Republicans are pretty united in their stance against raising taxes and cap and trade and so on. So I think that we will be in pretty good shape.
That used to be like one of the main topics, like one of the main issues that you could really count on was, we don't want to raise taxes. People don't want to pay more taxes. and it does affect the nickel and diming.
Yeah.
It affects the poor more than it affects the rich. I don't know. It's like they put some sort of false virtue above that now, like more than like being overtaxed. It's crazy. But yeah, I think a good takeaway as we wrap up is we need to be loud. People like you, people like me, we're loud, right? I'm loud, kind of loud. So yeah, we got to be loud and get the data out there, because I feel so sorry for the voters, because it would all go totally different if they knew, you know?
Absolutely. I think the biggest point is that you have to over-communicate. You have to out-communicate the Democrats. And when you do, and people hear what's going on, they will side with Republicans on these issues.
Exactly. All right, well, that's it. Thanks for joining us here on Free Speech Northwest. We'll see you next time.